Do you ever think about why um, God put you in this town? Why of all places in the world did God uh, decide that you were going to live your life out in the middle of the Midwest? You're not really close to the mountains. You're not really close to the oceans or the seas. Like most of the highly populated cities are close to beaches and the ocean because that's where the ports were. Well, people came down the river and for trade to get from one place to another, and people needed other places to live because some of these places were too crowded. And they had to grow crops, and they had to grow cows and pigs and other animals to sustain themselves and to sustain the other people. They could sell the crops and the meat to the people living in the cities and make a pretty good living. And so here in Cincinnati, we get to modern times. Why am I in the modern times? Well, so you can tell people what you've seen and heard. And the thing is, people that are a little bit older, right? Because I was born in, the early 1970s. Um, I've seen some things that I could tell people, and that they might not even believe me. But these are things that I've seen, and so the thing is, people my age that live in Cincinnati have seen hell freeze over, right? The Cincinnati Reds, usually, they're a pretty decent baseball team. Sometimes they can barely get to the playoffs, but it just feels like the Reds are never going to ever win a World Series. Well, we remember 1975, 1976, 1990. Now, the peculiar thing about the 1970s is after the Reds beat the big old tough, impossible to beat New York Yankees, right? The richest club in all of baseball. And that's one of our excuses. We don't have the money. We're not in that big of a market. Okay. The next year they did the same thing to Boston, another big market team. And a lot of the time, like the whole time during the World Series, people were talking about how the other team was actually better. And that was the way it was in the 1990s, 1990. The Reds swept the A's, but there were a lot of people talking about how the A's were actually better. They never gave the Reds credit, but here's the thing. Hell froze over. And the thing about people in Cincinnati, and I'll tell you this, and you won't believe this either, but the people of Cincinnati could walk on water. And you're like, Dan, that's not possible. That's something only Jesus could do. And I said, Peter did it for a little bit, and then he took his eyes off Jesus. But when he had his eyes on Jesus, he could walk on water. But Dan, that don't happen now. It's not happening now. I'm like, not right now. I said, you need faith to walk on water. But there's another thing that you need, and that's patience, right? Sometimes you can't just immediately walk on the water. You gotta wait for the Lord's timing. And the people in Cincinnati waited for the Lord's timing. And that Ohio River, they walked on top of that water. Dan, they didn't walk on top of water. You're lying. Nobody could walk on top of water, especially not in the Ohio River. It's not the Dead Sea. You can't just float. And I'm like, no, they were standing on the water. They walked on the water. They went from one side of the river to the other side of the river. And the people our age, see this white hair? We saw it happen. Sometimes we walked on the water on the ponds near where our neighbors lived. I walked on my neighbor's pond. Dan, you didn't do that. Don't you say that. That's a lie. Do you know that you can't be a false prophet? I'm like, the thing is, you don't understand. If you understood, if you were there, you would understand, okay? You need faith and you need patience. Because after we walked on the water, me and my friends at Irma's Pond, we ice skated on the water. We had to take axes and put holes in the water, in the ice, so that the cows could drink, okay? But you didn't walk on water, you walked on ice, Dan. That's a different thing. That's not the same thing. And I'm like, did you go to science class? Did you graduate high school? Ice and water are both H2O. They are the same thing. They're not the same thing, Dan. There's different states of matter that you should have learned about in science. You got solid, that's ice. You got liquid, that's water. You got gas, that's steam. You got plasma, that's ouch. Ooh, that's hot. So there you go. The hell froze over, and there was a championship in Cincinnati. And we walked on water. Amen.